What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit different than the kind of content that I've been uploading recently, but this is a kind of video that I have done in the past. So we are going to be doing another iceberg chart video. I've recently gotten back into iceberg charts as I've been browsing Reddit, and like in the past, it has piqued my interest, so I figured why not take the time to make a video about a cool iceberg that I found. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So this is part one of the photographs iceberg. So this is the start of part one of our photographs iceberg. But before we get started with the actual video, I want to take a quick second and I want to thank the creator of this iceberg. You can find them on Reddit as TheUmbilicalCordGuyReddit. I'm going to go ahead and post their name so you can give them a follow, but without them, we would not be able to have this video today. So I figure it's very appropriate to give the creator a big shout out because this is a really cool iceberg. I've got my notes here. It's going to be a long one, so strap in and let's get started with part one of the photographs iceberg. Our first photo is called Bliss. Now you guys might know this as the Windows XP wallpaper. This photo was originally titled Bucolic Green Hills, and it is the default wallpaper for Microsoft system Windows XP. The image is virtually unedited, so there's very little editing going on when you see that image of those green hills, the blue sky, the white clouds. That is almost exactly untouched. So the image is of Los Camerons, American viticultural area in California wine country, and the photographer is Charles O'Rear, who took the photo in 1996, sold the rights to the photo to Microsoft in 2000, and it is estimated that this is one of the most viewed images in history with billions of views. And I kind of believe that, to be honest, because you know what, Windows XP came here with a vengeance. I felt like Windows XP was here for a long time. Like, I still go into places that are running their entire businesses on Windows XP, and it's even older than other operating systems like Windows Vista. I rarely see Windows Vista. I feel like Windows XP not only predominates, when it comes to business computers and whatnot, but I feel like it also has a very strong cultural impact. And I think it has a lot to do with that iconic image. So that is Bliss. Our next image is called the Blue Marble. Now this is an iconic photo too. I think this one has a lot of cultural significance as well. If I'm not mistaken, I do believe this was like a wallpaper option that was available on either the iPhone 3G or 3GS. I do have a distinct memory of being a kid and watching an iPhone commercial with one of those models held up, and it's just the hand navigating through an iPhone lock screen. And I do believe that this image, or an image very similar to this, is the wallpaper that is on that commercial. This image was taken on December 7th, 1972 at about 18,000 miles away from Earth, and it is taken by the crew of the Apollo 17 spacecraft on its way to the moon. So iconic. Could you imagine? You're taking a photo of everyone on Earth minus whoever is in space. Very much so. You're taking a picture of everyone who is on Earth in some sense. And it is one of the most reproduced images in history. So, you know what? It does seem like a lot of these images are going to be battling it off to see who is the most viewed or the most reproduced image in history. So that is the Blue Marble. Our next image is called Earthrise. Half Earth from a distance. That's very literally what it is. It's like half the Earth from a long distance, and it is being reflected, looked like, by the sun very, very nicely. So this is a photograph of Earth and some of the moon's surface taken from the lunar orbiter by astronaut William Anders on December 24th, 1968 on the Apollo 8 mission. And the photo is taken with a highly modified Hasselblad 500 EL camera with an electric drive. And I do have a little bit of a snippet of the transcript from when the photo was taken. So it goes, Anders, oh my God, look at that picture over there. That's the Earth coming up. Wow, that's pretty. Borman, hey, don't take that. It's not scheduled. Jokingly. Anders laughs. You got a color film, Jim? Hand me that roll of color quick, would ya? Lovell, oh man, that's great. So that's just a quick update, a quick transcript of the moment when the photo was taken. So that's very cool to have that as a piece of the photo's history. But that is Earthrise. All right, our next photo is called the Pale Blue Dot. And it's a photograph of planet Earth taken on February 14th, 1990 by the Voyager 1 space probe from a record distance of about 6 billion kilometers or 3.7 billion miles from Earth as part of the day's family portrait series of images of the solar system. And that image is actually coming up in this portion of the iceberg. So we will be seeing that in a video coming up, that portrait photo that they are referencing here. In the photograph, Earth's apparent size is less than a pixel, so very small. The planet appears as tiny as a dot against the vastness of space, among bands of sunlight reflected on the camera. Voyager 1, which had completed its primary mission and was leaving the solar system, was commanded by NASA to turn its camera around and take one last photograph of Earth across a gray expanse of space at the request of astronomer and author Carl Sagan. I do believe that he comes up a lot in a lot of the space images that are going to be in this iceberg. At least in part 1, Carl Sagan's name does get dropped quite a bit. The phrase pale blue dot was coined by Sagan in his reflections on the photograph's significance. Our next photo is Vijay Day in Times Square. Now again, this is another very culturally significant image, I would say. Vijay Day in Times Square is a photograph by Alfred, I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to try to get it as good as I can, Eisenstadt, that portrays a U.S. Navy sailor embracing and kissing a total stranger, a dental assistant on Victory over Japan Day / Vijay Day in New York City's Times Square on August 14th, 1945. The photograph was published a week later in Life magazine amongst many photographs of celebrations around the United States that were presented in a 12-page section entitled Victory Celebrations. A 2-page spread faces a montage of 3 similar photographs of celebrators in Washington, D.C., Kansas City, and Miami, opposite the Eisenstadt photograph that was given a full-page display on the right-hand side. Perfect. That is also a very iconic photo, I would say. I think this is one of those images that kind of it's like stuck and like cemented in the cultural zeitgeist because it's often reproduced, and there's like you often see it referenced in a lot of popular media, you know, like The Simpsons or cartoons and movies and whatnot. So I think that does kind of cement that in the cultural zeitgeist. Our next image is called Afghan Girl, and it's a 1984 photographic portrait of Sharbat Gula, an Afghan refugee in Pakistan during the Soviet-Afghan War. The photograph was taken by an American photojournalist, Steve McCurry, near the Pakistani city of Peshawar. Peshawar famously appeared on the June 1985 cover of National Geographic. While the portrait subject initially remained unknown, she was identified by early 2002. Gula, the ethnic Pashtun from Afghanistan's Nangarhar province, was a 12-year-old child residing in Pakistan's Nasir Bagh. In light of the Cold War, the portrait was described as the first world's third world Mona Lisa, in reference to the 16th century painting of the same name by Leonardo da Vinci. Gula's image became emblematic in some social circles as the refugee girl / woman located in some distant camp that was deserving of compassion from the Western viewer, and also a symbol of Afghanistan to the West. Wow, so kind of a harsh critique of that photo as a caricature of everything that's going on in a part of the world that is often unknown to a lot of Westerners. So very interesting history that a photo can have, I would say that. All right, bringing it home, our next photo is called Migrant Mother, and it's a photo taken in 1936 in Nipomo, California by the photographer Dorothy Lang, and the photo has become an icon of the Great Depression. So it is something that is referenced and that people think about when they hear the word or they hear about the Great Depression, and it's considered part of the last classic canon of American art and international photography. So the Migrant Mother depicts a mother looking off into the distance with 2 of her children at her side and an infant in her lap. Her children's faces are not shown as the children both bury their faces in their mother's shoulder. The black and white photograph print held in the Museum of Modern Art is approximately the same size as a sheet of North American printer paper. So I do believe that is like 8.5 by 9 inches or something like that. So the woman and her children are smaller than life-size figure. The mother is the focal point of this photograph, and as she is the only person in the photograph without an obscured face. This was intentional, as Lang instructed the 2 children to turn their backs to the camera and rest their hands on their mother's shoulders. By doing so, Lang was able to eliminate the possibility of unwanted effects from exchanges of competing countenances. Thus, the viewer's attention is immediately drawn towards the mother's anxious face rather than her children. Unlike the 5 other photographs Lang took that day, Migrant Mother's frame is much more focused on the mother and children, as the frame does not allow any room for the backgrounds to be shown. In fact, the only part of the photograph that are shown are above the mother's and children's head. So that's a pretty good history, a pretty good summary of the Migrant Mother, and that is actually a really cool photo. We're going to have that up here. Our next photo is called The Rising of Iwo Jima, and is an iconic photograph of 6 U.S. Marines raising the U.S. flag atop Mount Suribachi during the Battle of Iwo Jima at the final stages of the Pacific War. The photograph, taken by Joe Rosenthal of the Associated Press on February 23, 1945, was first published in Sunday newspapers 2 days later and reprinted in thousands of publications. It was the only photograph to win the Pulitzer Prize for Photography Memorial in 1954, which was dedicated to honor all Marines who died in the service in 1775. The memorial, sculpted by Felix de Weldon, is located in Arlington Ridge Park, near the Ord-Witzel Gate of the Arlington National Cemetery at the Netherlands Carillon. The photograph has come to be regarded in the U.S. as one of the most significant and recognizable images of World War II. Now, I would have to agree with that because it is a very iconic image, and as someone that grew up with a lot of cousins in the military, or interested in the military, or enlisting in it and watching war movies, this is a very iconic image that you do see replicated at times, and that when you think of the military, it kind of is one of those iconic photos that you can't help but think of. The flag raising occurred in the early afternoon after the mountaintop was captured, and a smaller flag was raised on top that morning. 3 of the 6 Marines in the photograph, Sergeant Michael Strank, Corporal Harlan Block, and Private First Class Franklin Sousley, were killed in action during the battle. Block was identified as Sergeant Hank Hansen until January 1947, and Sousley was identified as PHM2C John Bradley USN until 2016. The other 3 Marines in the photographs were Corporals, then Privates First Class, Ira Hayes, Harold Schultz, and Harold Keller. Schultz was identified as Sousley until June 2016, and Keller was identified as Renee Gagnon until October 2019. All of the men served in the 5th Marine Division on Iwo Jima, and since then the Associated Press has relinquished its copyrights to the photograph, placing it in the public domain. Now, I do think that this means that you can then take this image, replicate it, and not have to worry about copyright because it is in the public domain. So that is something really cool, that a photo as iconic to U.S. military history can be in the public domain, so that people can talk about it, replicate it, use it, interact with the image, and not have to worry about copyright infringement with this. So that's really cool. Our next photo is called Into the Jaws of Death, and it's also called Taxis to Hell and Back. Into the Jaws of Death is a photograph taken on June 6, 1944 by Robert F. Sargent, a chief photographer in the U.S. Coast Guard. Alright, so the image depicts soldiers of the U.S. Army's 1st Infantry Division disembarking an LCVP, which is a landing craft vehicle personnel from the USS Samuel Chase on Omaha Beach at the Normandy landings during World War II. Not images. It's also one of those iconic intros that Battle of D-Day in the movie Saving Private Ryan, which is very iconic and arguably probably one of the best war depictions of war ever. But that's a topic for another day. The photograph was taken by Chief Photographer's mate Robert Sargent during the troop landing phase of Operation Neptune, the naval component of the Operation Overlord Normandy landing, commonly known as D-Day. The image was one of the most widely reproduced photographs of the D-Day landings. The original photograph is stored by the United States Coast Guard Historian's Office. Saving Private Ryan movie does start is with an image very eerily similar to this image here, Into the Jaws of Death. So very interesting, very cool image. What's up, guys? Sorry, had to film this in 2 parts. I was getting very tired and my eyes are strained because I work from home. So yeah, I'm staring at a computer all day and whatnot, and it got to the point where all of my vision was just blurry, and I was having such a tough time focusing. So I've given it a day. Our next photograph is the Pillars of Creation. So the photo is taken in space. So a lot of the information provided for this photo is more about what makes up the Pillars of Creation than the actual photo itself, but it is still a very cool looking photo. So I think the information on how the pillars are created is still very interesting and worth talking about for this iceberg. So the pillars are composed of cool molecular hydrogen and dust that are being eroded by photo evaporation from the ultraviolet light of stars that are hot and relatively close. So the leftmost pillar is about 4 light years in length, so that's long because the distance is being measured in time. The finger-like protrusions at the top of the clouds are larger than the solar system, I'm assuming they mean ours, and are made visible by the shadows of evaporating gaseous globules, EGGs for short, which shield the gas behind them from intensive UV flux. Eggs are themselves incubators of new stars. The stars then emerge from the eggs, which then are evaporated. So the photograph was taken by the Hubble Space Telescope of elephant trunks of interstellar gas and dust in the Eagle Nebula in the Serpens constellation, some 6,500 to 7,000 light years away from the Earth. They're named so because the gas and dust are in the process of creating new stars, which are also being eroded by the light from nearby stars that have recently formed. So the photo was taken on the April 1st, 1995, and it was named one of the top 10 photographs from Hubble by space.com. So don't know how interesting that is, but that is the case. The astronomers responsible for the photo were Jeff Hester and Paul Scowen from Arizona State University, and the region that was rephotographed by ESA's Herschel Space Observatory in 2011, again by the Hubble Space Telescope in 2014 with a newer camera, and the James Webb Telescope in 2022. So it does look like we have 3 versions of the pillars now, hopefully each with more detail than the last. So that's very cool. So let's move on. Our next photo is the Tank Men. At the northeast edge of Tiananmen Square, along with Shangan Avenue, shortly after noon on June 5th, 1989, the day after the Chinese government's violent crackdown in the Tiananmen protests, tank men stood in the middle of the wide avenue directly in the path of a column of approaching Type 59 tanks. Stuart Franklin, who was on assignment for Time magazine, told the New York Times, "At some point shots were fired and tanks carried on down the road towards us, leaving Tiananmen Square behind until blocked by a lone protester. He wore a white shirt and black trousers, and he held 2 shopping bags. As the tanks came by to stop, the man gestured at them with one of the bags. In response, the lead tank attempted to drive around the man, but the man repeatedly stepped into the path of the tank in the show of non-violent action. After repeatedly attempting to go around, the lead tank stopped its engine and the armored vehicles behind it followed suit. There was a short pause with the men and the tanks having reached a quiet, still impasse. Having successfully brought the column to a halt, the man climbed onto the hull of the bottomed-up lead tank and, after briefly stopping at the driver's hatch, appeared in video footage of the incident to call into various ports in the tank's turret. He then climbed atop the turret and seemed to have a short conversation with a crew member at the gunner's hatch. After ending the conversation, the man descended from the tank. The tank commander briefly emerged from his hatch as the tanks restarted their engines, ready to continue on. At that point, the man, who was still standing within a meter or a yard or two from the side of the lead tank, left in front of the vehicles once again and quickly reestablished the man-tank standoff. Little is publicly known of the man's identity or that of the commander of the lead tank. Shortly after the incident, British tabloid Sunday Express named him as Wang Wei-lin, a 19-year-old student who was later charged with political hooliganism and attempting to subvert members of the People's Liberation Army. This claim has been rejected by internal Chinese Communist Party documents, which reported that they could not find the man according to the Hong Kong-based Information Center for Human Rights. One party member was quoted saying, "We can't find him. We got his name from journalists. We have checked through computers but can't find him. Among the dead are among those in prison." Numerous theories have sprung up as the man's identity and current whereabouts. So that's actually really cool, especially for me as a creator. You know, this is an image that I have encountered in the past, and I've even, you know, watched videos that mention it, but this is probably the most information I have with regard to the Tank Man photo than a lot of other things. So it is very cool that I get to experience that with you guys in real time. Let's move on though. All right, so this next photo is Buzz Aldrin photographed by Neil Armstrong. So this was on the Apollo 11 mission, which went from July 16th through the 24th, 1969, was the American space flight that first landed humans on the moon. Commander Neil Armstrong and lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin landed the Apollo lunar module Eagle on July 20th, 1969. And Armstrong became the first person to step onto the moon's surface 6 hours and 39 minutes later, on July 21st at around 2:56 UTC. Aldrin joined him 19 minutes later, and they spent about 2.25 hours together exploring the site they had named Tranquility Base upon landing. Armstrong and Aldrin collected 47.5 pounds of lunar material to bring back to Earth as pilot Michael Collins flew the command module Columbia in lunar orbit and were on the moon surface for 21 hours 36 minutes before lifting off to rejoin Columbia. All right, that's cool. So that's that for this one. Our next photo is Lunch Atop a Skyscraper. So Lunch Atop a Skyscraper is a black and white photograph taken on September 20th, 1932 of 11 iron workers sitting on a steel beam 850 feet above the ground on the 69th floor of the RCA building in Manhattan, New York City. It was arranged as a publicity stunt, part of a campaign promoting the skyscraper. The photograph was first published in October 1932 during the construction of the Rockefeller Center. It was later acquired by Corbis Images in 1995. Now again, this is another one of those instances where I really appreciate getting to make a video like this, because I get to do a ton of research about these images and these topics that I wouldn't otherwise. And this is cool because I've seen this image, Lunch Atop a Skyscraper, a ton. You know, it's very much cemented into the cultural zeitgeist, but I always assumed, you know, that it was just a candid photo. So to find out that it's in fact staged and part of a publicity stunt gives me, I don't know, it's almost too much information, you know, for something that I've encountered so much in the past and that I'm barely finding out now. That's awesome. I really do appreciate that. So the photograph depicts 11 men eating lunch while sitting on a steel beam 850 feet above the 69th floor. These men were immigrant workers employed at the RCA building during the construction of Rockefeller Center. They were accustomed to walking along the girders. The photograph was taken as part of a campaign promoting the skyscraper. Other photographs taken depict the workers throwing a football and pretending to sleep on the girder. Central Park is visible in the background. The photo was first published in the Sunday supplement of the New York Herald Tribune on October 2nd, 1932 with the caption, "Lunch Atop a Skyscraper." So that's cool. This photo is actually a little bit older than I thought it was. I thought it was like mid 20th century, but it's even earlier than that. So again, very interesting to know so much about a photo that I've encountered so many times in the past and have not thought beyond the surface level. Now this next photo is called The Fallen Man. So a little bit of trigger warning for this photo. This image is very gruesome, especially when we dive into the history of this photo. So you have been warned. So this next photo is called The Fallen Man and is a photograph taken by the Associated Press photographer Richard Drew of a man falling from the World Trade Center during the September 11 attacks in New York City. The unidentified man in the image was trapped in the upper floors of the North Tower, and it is unclear whether he fell while searching for safety or he jumped to escape the fire and smoke. The photograph was taken at exactly 9:41 a.m. on the day of the attacks. The photograph was widely criticized after publication in international media on September 2nd, 2001, with readers labeling the image as disturbing, cold-blooded, ghoulish, and sadistic. However, in the years following, the photo has gained acclamation. Now regarded as a masterpiece in photojournalism, it is regarded as one of the greatest and most important pieces of art in the 21st century. A Time magazine retrospective published in 2016 stated, "Falling Man's identity is still unknown, but he is believed to have been an employee at the windows on the World Restaurant, which sat atop the North Tower. The true power of Falling Man, however, is less about who its subject was and more about what he became, a makeshift unknown soldier in an often unknown and uncertain war, suspended forever in history." Very interesting to know a little bit more about this photo that I've encountered previously in the past. Very much thankful for that. So let's move on now. This next photograph is called The Last Photograph of Elmira Sanchez, and again, like the previous image, I do want to give a little bit of a trigger warning since the history behind this image is a little bit dark. So Elmira Sanchez Garzon was a 13-year-old Colombian girl killed in Armero, Tolima by the 1985 eruption of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano. Volcanic debris mixed with ice to form massive lahars, volcanically induced mud flows, landslides, and debris flows. I guess that's the definition of that word. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, which rushed into the river's valley below the mountain, killing more than 25,000 people and destroying Armero and 13 other villages. So that is insane to begin with. After a lahar demolished her home, Sanchez was pinned beneath the debris of her house, where she remained trapped in water for 3 days, as rescue workers had no way to render life-saving medical care if they amputated her hopelessly pinned legs. Her plight was documented as she descended from calmness into agony. Her courage and dignity touched journalists and relief workers who put great efforts into comforting her. After 60 hours of struggling, she died, likely as a result of either gangrene or hypothermia. Her death highlighted the failure of officials to respond correctly to the threat of the volcano, contrasted with the efforts of volunteer rescue workers to reach and treat trapped victims despite inadequate supplies and equipment. So that's very gnarly, yeah, and does highlight, the systemic failures that led to this moment. A photograph of Sanchez taken by the photojournalist Frank Fournier shortly before she died was published in news outlets around the world. It was later designated the World Press Photo of the Year for 1986. Sanchez has remained a lasting figure in popular culture, remembered through music, literature, and commemorative articles. As despite her predicament, Sanchez remained relatively positive. She sang to German Santa Maria Barragan, a journalist who was working as a volunteer, asked for sweet food, drank soda, and agreed to be interviewed. At times she was scared and prayed or cried. On the third night, Sanchez began hallucinating again that she did not want to be late for school and mentioned a math exam. Near the end of her life, Sanchez's eyes reddened, her face swelled, and her hands whitened, and at one point she asked the people to leave her so they could rest. Hours later, the workers returned with a pump and tried to save her, but her legs were bent under the concrete as if she was kneeling. It was impossible to free her without severing her legs. Lacking the surgical equipment to save her from the effects of amputation, the doctors present agreed that it would be more humane to let her die. In all, Sanchez suffered nearly 3 nights, roughly 60 hours before she died at approximately 10:05 a.m. on November 16th from exposure, most likely from gangrene or hypothermia. Let's move on. The next photo is called the Hindenburg Disaster. So the Hindenburg Disaster was an airship accident that occurred on May 6, 1937 in Manchester Township, New Jersey, the U.S. The German passenger airship LZ-129 Hindenburg caught fire and was destroyed during its attempt to dock with its mooring mast at Naval Air Station Lakehurst. The accident caused 35 fatalities, 13 passengers and 22 crewmen from the 97 people on board, 36 passengers and 61 crewmen, and an additional fatality on the ground. The disaster was the subject of newsreel coverage, photographs, and Herbert Morrison's recorded radio eyewitness reports from the landing fields, which were broadcast the next day. A variety of hypotheses have been put forward for both the cause of ignition and the initial fuel for the ensuing fire. The publicity shattered public confidence in the giant passenger-carrying Ridges airship and marked the abrupt end of the airship era. You know what, to be honest, man, I totally get why that would happen. I don't personally see myself ever wanting to travel via airship, knowing that the Hindenburg disaster was a thing. That is interesting though, given how many plane, train, and automobile accidents there are, yet these are still very popular forms of transportation. So maybe the future of airship travel in a different timeline is a lot different. Who knows? That's an answer to a question we'll probably never have, but let's move on. All right, so this next photo is called the Abbey Road cover, and of course it depicts the cover of the album Abbey Road by the Beatles. So it is the 11th studio album by the English rock band The Beatles. It is the last album the group started recorded, although Let It Be was the last album completed before the band's breakup in April 1970. It was mostly recorded in April, July, and August 1969 and was released on September 26, 1969 in the UK and on October 1st, 1969 in the US. Reaching number one in both countries, a double A-sided single from the album, Something/Come Together, was released in October, which also topped the charts in the US. Alright, so it doesn't seem like the information here is with regards to the photo, which is kind of a bummer because it is such an iconic photo and such an iconic part of popular culture. It is more so just a history of the album Abbey Road. So again, a little bit disappointing, but again, we do appreciate all the effort that went into creating this iceberg and all the linked articles that were attached to it. So we do appreciate the effort of the creators, but I digress. Let's move on. Our next iconic photo is called Instagram Egg. So the Instagram Egg is a photo of an egg posted by the account at world_record_egg on Instagram. It became a global phenomenon and an internet meme within days of its creation. It is the most liked Instagram post, and in 2019 was the most liked online post on any website in history. See, that's insane because I think I rarely, if ever, encountered the Instagram Egg. I think I encountered it once as a meme years ago, but I personally, I don't know about it. I don't think I know anybody who follows the egg, but when I look up the Instagram Egg, it has millions of followers, so that is insane. So the owner of the account was revealed to be Chris Godfrey, an advertising creative who later worked with his two friends, Elisa Kahn Whelan and CJ Brown, on a Hulu commercial featuring the egg intended to raise awareness of mental health. The photograph was originally taken by Sergei Platonov, who then posted it to Shutterstock on June 23, 2015 with the title Egg Isolated on White Background. On January 4th, 2019, the @world_record_egg account was created and posted an image of a bird egg with the caption, "Let's set a world record together and get the most liked post on Instagram, beating the current world record held by Kylie Jenner, 18 million. We got this." Jenner's previous record, the first photo of her daughter Stormy, had garnered a total of 18.4 million likes. So it does look like the account was created in efforts to beat the Kardashians at what they do best. So I guess we can honor their intent to try to oust, social media deity. So we can honor that. The post quickly reached 18.4 million likes in just under 10 days, becoming the most liked Instagram post of all time. It then continued to rise over 45 million likes in the next 48 hours, surpassing the Despacito music video and taking the world record for the most liked online post on any platform. What an interesting history of a photo I've only encountered maybe once or twice before. Our next photo is called Bernie Sanders Mittens Meme. The Bernie Sanders Mittens meme refers to a photograph of Bernie Sanders, a U.S. Senator from Vermont and former presidential candidate, seated during the inauguration of Joe Biden and wearing a face mask and distinctive mittens, went viral. The photograph became an internet meme inspiring altered versions in which Sanders is placed in historical photographs and other humorous contexts. The popularity of the meme resulted in increased visibility for Sanders and demand for the mittens. When the inauguration of Joe Biden occurred on January 20th, 2021, a photograph of Vermont Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders was taken by, I'm going to butcher this name, Agence France Presse photographer Brendan Smolowski. It depicts a masked Sanders sitting on a folded chair spaced apart from the attendees. He is wearing winter clothing most noticeably a large fluffy pair of mittens, which were made by Vermont elementary school teacher Jen Ellis. The photograph became a popular internet meme. I do roughly remember this too because everyone was paying attention to this election, and I do believe I was there. I got to witness the whole Bernie Sanders meme thing in real time. So that is a really cool tidbit there, getting to witness history in the making. But that is all we have for Bernie Sanders mitten memes. Let's go ahead and move on. Our next photo is Obama and Biden await updates on bin Laden. So this is the Situation Room. That is the title of this photograph. It was taken by White House photographer Pete Souza in its namesake, the White House Situation Room, at 4:05 p.m. on May 1st, 2011. The photograph shows President of the U.S. Barack Obama along with his national security team receiving live updates from Operation Neptune Spear, which led to the killing of Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda. The White House photographer Peter Souza commented on this photograph for Time magazine in late 2012, writing, much has been made of this photograph that shows the president and vice president and the national security team monitoring in real time the mission against Osama bin Laden, May 1st, 2011. Some more background on the photograph. The White House Situation Room is actually comprised of several different conference rooms. The majority of the time, the president convenes meetings in the large conference room with assigned seats, but to monitor this mission, the group moved into a much smaller conference room. The president chose to sit next to Brigadier General Marshall B. Brad Webb, Assistant Commanding General of Joint Special Operations Command, who was point man for the communications taking place. With so few chairs, others just stood in the back of the room. I was jammed into a corner of the room with no room to move. During the mission itself, I made approximately 100 photographs, almost all from the cramped spot in the corner. Please note a classified document seen in the front of Sec. Clinton has been obscured. Oh, that's cool. I actually didn't notice that. Our next photo is called Family Portrait, parentheses Voyager. So the family portrait, or sometimes referred to as the portrait of the planet, is an image of the solar system acquired by Voyager 1 on February 14, that's Valentine's Day, 1990, from a distance of approximately 6 billion kilometers from Earth. It features individual frames of 6 planets on a partial background indicating their relative position. The picture is a mosaic of 60 frames. The frames used to compose the image were the last photographs taken by either Voyager spacecraft, which continued to relay other telemetry afterward. The frames are also the source of the famous pale blue dot image of the Earth. So that is an image that we encountered early in this section of the iceberg. Just to recap that there, plug the beginning of this video. Astronomer Carl Sagan, there goes that name that I said that would come up, who was part of the Voyager imaging team, campaigned for many years to have the pictures taken. So, yo, shouts out Carl Sagan, because we will not be talking about these images on this iceberg video without the effort and possibly the headaches that he caused trying to get these photos taken. 6 planets are visible in the mosaic from left to right: Jupiter, Earth, Venus, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. The Sun, also a point of light distance, is included in the image. 3 then planets were missed. Mercury was too close to the Sun to be seen. Mars could not be detected by the Voyager cameras due to its position, resulting in only producing a thin crescent from the viewpoint of the spacecraft. And Pluto, which in 1990 was still considered a planet, remember that it is no longer a planet for us, it's like a dwarf planet or something like that, was not included because its small size and distance from the Sun left it too dim to image. Mars could have been imaged through a clear filter rather than the colored ones used, but by the time this was realized, the process was too far advanced to make the changes. So it does look like some of the family members from our solar family were excluded from the family portrait, but hey, what's a family portrait without a little bit of family drama? And this one has that. So we appreciate that. The last tidbit about this is that the image was acquired at a distance of approximately 40.11 astronomical units, or about 3.7 billion miles from Earth. But you know what? Who's counting? What kind of measuring stick is that long? Or measuring tape, I should say. Approximately 32 degrees above the ecliptic plane. I don't know what that is, but it is important enough that they mentioned it. Of the 2 Voyager spacecraft, Voyager 1 was chosen to create the mosaic because its trajectory had taken it above the plane of the solar system, and unlike Voyager 2, was in a position to view Jupiter free of light disturbances from the sun's glare. In 2013, a reverse image was taken of Voyager 1 using radio telescopes. Voyager 1 cannot be seen in visible light, but its radio signal is very bright compared to most natural things studied by radio telescopes. So, again, very, very interesting. It's crazy. It's crazy how we are able to have these beautiful images of the solar system, of the pillars of creation, of the Earth. I really do appreciate getting to do the research. I could dive deep into these. Our next photo is called Guerrillero Heroico, or Heroic Warrior, and it is the iconic Che photo. Now, when I think of an incredibly iconic image, this is definitely one of those that comes to mind. So let's dive in a little bit into the history. So the Guerrillero Heroico, English translation, heroic guerrilla fighter, is an iconic photograph of Marxist revolutionary Che Guevara taken by Alberto Corda. It was captured on March 5th, 1960 in Havana, Cuba at a memorial service for the victims of La Cubre explosion. By the end of the 1960s, the image, in conjunction with Guevara's subsequent action and eventual execution, helped solidify the leader as a cultural icon. Corda has said that the moment he shot the picture, he was drawn to Guevara's facial expression, which showed absolute implacability, as well as anger and pain. Years later, Corda would say that the photograph shows Che's firm and stoic character. Guevara was 31 years old at the time that the photograph was taken. Emphasizing the image's ubiquitous nature and wide appeal, the Maryland Institute College of Art called the picture a symbol of the 20th century and the world's most famous photograph. Versions of it have been painted, printed, digitized, embroidered, tattooed, silkscreened, sculpted, or sketched on nearly every surface imaginable, leading the Victoria and Albert Museum to say that the photograph has been reproduced more than any other image in photography. Jonathan Green, director of the UCR California Museum of Photography, has speculated that Corda's image has worked its way into language around the world. It has become an alphanumeric symbol, a hieroglyph, an instant symbol. It mysteriously reappears whenever there's a conflict. There isn't anything else in history that serves in this way, and I do have to agree. And now I will admit that I have a ton of bias with regards to this, because I was fortunate and privileged enough that I was able to study abroad in Cuba. I spent a semester living there with a host family, and so I personally saw this image everywhere. You know, I saw it on banners, on cars. I can't even count the number of times I saw the Che portrait tattooed on people's body parts, chest, everywhere. So I do have bias, but I do think I'm not exaggerating when I say that I agree that the Maryland Institute College of Art is probably correct when they say that this is probably one of the most reproduced images in the world. And almost ironically too, a lot of people like to say that, oh, like Che probably wouldn't have approved of the capitalization of his likeness, but I think it's okay to live in a world where that is ironic, right? Because we don't live in any other reality. So I don't know what to say with that. We'll leave it at that. But again, very, very interesting history for this iconic image. Our last image for this part one, a picture of Bruce McCandless II. So Bruce McCandless was born Byron Willis McCandless on June 8th, 1937. He did die on December 21st, 2017. He was a United States Navy officer and aviator. Now, I was a bit confused when I was doing the research for this iceberg. Now, the image, the iceberg is very generic. It just gives his name. So there isn't really a lot of information. I wasn't 100% sure what image they were referring to, but I do think they mean the one that I'm posting for this video. And it is an iconic image of Mr. McCandless II, an electrical engineer and NASA astronaut, where he became the first untethered spacewalk by using a manned maneuvering unit. So the image that I have for this entry is of that untethered walk, and I do believe that that is the image that is being referenced in this iceberg, but I can't say for certain. When I was doing the research for this entry, this did seem like a very iconic part since it was the first untethered walk. So I do believe that is what the creator of this iceberg meant. So that is the image that I am going to include for that. So that brings our part one All right, y'all. So I think we're going to call it there. That's going to be the end of part 1 of the first section of our photography iceberg. I do appreciate you guys sticking until the end. I'm working very diligently to get the second part of this first section of the iceberg completed and posted, but please keep in mind that these videos take a long time to research, edit, and put together, which is why I want to break them down into smaller and more manageable chunks. But I do appreciate your guys' patience with all of this. You guys are the reason I do this. And for now, I'll leave you guys. Stay healthy, stay hydrated, everyone. And I will see you guys in part 2 of the first section of our photography iceberg. So take care, everyone.